What if I told you the average retiree in the US lives on just over $50,000 a year? It sounds decent, but when you factor in rising costs and unexpected expenses, that money can disappear fast. Retirement might not be as comfortable as you think. So, are you really ready for the financial challenges that come with retirement? Or could there be some surprises waiting for you down the road? Retirement. It's supposed to be that golden phase where you finally kick back and enjoy the fruits of your labor, right? But let's peel back the curtain on what retirement income actually looks like in the US, and it might surprise you. Picture the average American age 65 and older pulls in about $4,199 a month, which adds up to a little over $50,000 a year. That sounds pretty good, but here's the twist. Not all that money comes from a cozy nest egg or savvy investments. Nope. For a lot of retirees, it's Social Security that keeps the lights on. We're talking about 58% of retired Americans who say Social Security is their main source of income. Let that sink in for a second. Over half of retirees are relying on Social Security as the cornerstone of their financial security. Compare that to the 34% who lean on pension plans or the 29% banking on their 401ks and other retirement savings. And it's clear, Social Security is the star of the show. Now, why is Social Security playing such a big role? It often comes down to some pretty common challenges. Think not enough savings, sky-high healthcare costs, or even the need to help out family members. The Social Security Administration tells us that 12% of men and 15% of women over 65 are counting on Social Security for 90% or more of their income. That's a serious dependence, showing just how crucial this support really is. And it gets more complicated. The average retirement income can vary widely depending on where you live. Local wages, cost of living, and state tax policies all play a role. In some states, retirees are pulling in twice as much as their counterparts in other states, thanks to these regional differences. Sure, higher local wages can mean bigger retirement savings, but they also come with higher living costs, making it a constant challenge to keep up with the lifestyle you've worked so hard to achieve. Now that you know where the money comes from, the real question is, how far will it actually go in covering your retirement expenses? So, you've made it to retirement. Congrats! Now comes the part where all that planning pays off, literally. But even with the best laid plans, the reality of managing retirement expenses can still surprise you. While it's true that some costs go down when you stop working, no more daily commutes or disability insurance premiums, the cost of living comfortably doesn't just disappear. In fact, the average American age 65 or older spent about $57,818 in 2022. Yep, that's according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. And here's the kicker. That's actually more than the median income for this age group. So what does that mean? It means many retirees might be stretching their budgets tighter than they would like to admit. Now, compared to younger folks, retirees do spend about $20,000 less annually. That drop reflects a shift in lifestyle and priorities. Less work-related expenses for one. But let's dig a little deeper into why retirees spend less. For starters, they're often living on a fixed income, with Social Security playing a huge role in keeping the lights on. This steady but limited income means many retirees have to be smart about their spending, focusing on essentials and cutting back on the extras. And then there's the fact that retirees have different kinds of expenses. Take transportation, for example. Sure, you're not commuting to work anymore, but that doesn't mean your transportation costs vanish. You've still got to deal with car payments, gas, insurance, maintenance, and all those pesky fees that come with owning a vehicle. And if you're using public transportation, that's another expense to consider. But here's the upside. With no job to rush to, you're probably spending less on getting around. On the flip side, travel costs might go up. After all, retirement is the perfect time to finally take those trips you've been dreaming about. Just make sure your budget's ready for it. Housing is another area where expenses might drop. As retirees pay off mortgages, downsize to cozier homes, or move to more affordable spots, housing costs often shrink. But, and this is a big but, not all expenses decrease in retirement. Healthcare, for one, tends to climb as we age. This can be a serious financial challenge, especially for those dealing with chronic conditions or living in areas where healthcare costs are sky high. And while Medicare helps, it doesn't cover everything. Plus, let's not forget the cost of living varies depending on where you are in the country. If you're in a pricey area, you might need to allocate more of your income to basic necessities like housing and groceries. Now that we've talked about expenses, let's look at your financial well-being. As we inch closer to retirement, it's not just about the income we'll be bringing in. It's also about taking stock of our overall financial health. That means looking at both our net worth and any lingering debt. Now, here's an interesting stat. The median net worth for households headed by someone aged 65 to 74 is around $410,000. For those 75 and older, it drops slightly to about $335,000. At first glance, these numbers might paint a picture of financial comfort, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. A big chunk of that net worth is often tied up into something you can't exactly cash in at the grocery store: your home. Home equity is great, but it's not liquid, meaning it's not money you can easily tap into for everyday expenses. So when we strip out the value of the house, the net worth can look a lot leaner. For many retirees, their actual cash savings and investments might be far lower than expected, leaving a thinner cushion to cover daily expenses, healthcare, and other retirement costs. But let's talk about the elephant in the room: debt. It's one of those things that can quietly gnaw away at financial stability in retirement. In 2022, the average debt for those aged 65 to 74 was about $134,950, according to the Federal Reserve. For those 75 and older, it was slightly lower at $94,620. And here's something that might surprise you. Nearly 65% of Americans aged 65 to 74 had some form of debt in 2022. Compare that to 1989, when less than half of this age group held debt, and only 21% of those 75 and older were in debt. Debt comes in many flavors: mortgages, credit cards, personal loans, auto loans, you name it. While not all debt is bad, like a low-interest mortgage you're comfortably managing, it can be a real burden in retirement, especially when you're living on a fixed income. The situation gets trickier for those in high-risk households. Think significant unsecured debt or high levels of borrowing compared to assets. For these retirees, managing debt alongside rising living costs and healthcare expenses can feel like a never-ending uphill battle. Speaking of financial challenges, there's one more factor that can quietly chip away at your retirement savings: inflation. Inflation. It's a word that can send shivers down the spine of anyone living on a fixed income, especially retirees. When your income stays the same, but the price of everything around you keeps creeping up, that loaf of bread suddenly feels a lot more important. But what exactly is inflation? Simply put, it's the rate at which the prices of goods and services increase year after year. And while that might sound like a minor inconvenience, the reality can be much harsher. Let's take a quick trip back in time. On January 1st, 1981, the US inflation rate was a staggering 13.9%. Fast forward to recent years, where inflation hung around a more manageable 1 to 3%. But in 2022, it spiked to over 9%, a real gut punch for those already stretching their budgets. Thankfully, it's been trending back down towards the Federal Reserve's target of 2%. But even at these low rates, inflation can quietly erode your purchasing power over time. If you had $1,000 today, in 30 years with a steady 2% inflation rate, that money would only buy you $552 worth of goods. If inflation ticked up to 3%, that same $1,000 would shrink to just $412 in purchasing power. And Heaven forbid inflation hits 5 or 6%. The impact could be much more severe. For retirees, this is a particularly tough pill to swallow. Many rely on a fixed income, which doesn't stretch as far when prices keep climbing. To make matters worse, the things retirees tend to spend money on, like healthcare, often see prices increase that outpace general inflation. Take healthcare, for example. A 65-year-old couple in good health retiring in 2021 with Medicare Parts B and D and supplemental insurance could be looking at a whopping $662,000 in healthcare costs for the rest of their lives. And that's assuming things stay relatively stable. If you haven't planned for inflation, it can really sneak up on you. Some retirees end up having to cut back on essentials or dip into their savings faster than they'd anticipated. And that's not just a financial burden, it's a quality of life issue. So, what can you do? While inflation can feel like a looming threat, proper financial planning can go a long way in keeping it at bay. The trick? Start planning and investing as early as possible. The sooner you build a diversified portfolio with assets that tend to outpace inflation, like stocks or real estate, the better positioned you'll be to protect your purchasing power and make sure your savings last as long as you do. But remember, retirement planning isn't just about stacking up cash. It's also about smartly managing your expenses and any liabilities. Think about how your spending might shift over time. You might spend less on commuting, but healthcare costs, they're likely to go up. That's why it's crucial to factor in potential increases in medical expenses or other surprises life might throw your way. And here's something else to consider. How long do you expect to be in retirement? We're living longer these days, which is great, but it also means your savings needs to stretch further. It's all about ensuring that your income sources, whether it's Social Security, pensions, or investments, are enough to support you through your golden years. Retirement might seem like the finish line, but in reality, it's just the beginning of a new financial journey. The key is knowing where you stand and planning for what's ahead. Now, I want to hear from you. What's the one thing you're most concerned about when it comes to retirement? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to leave a like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell for more amazing videos like this one.